Hey guys, welcome back in. I think you'll be able to tell, but I've got a bit of a cold this week, so I'll ask for your indulgence for this episode. It's been quite the week in the AI world. That's something I'm beginning to say, regularly. But we're coming up on the first anniversary of ChatGPT being released to the public, and things are not slowing down. So for that reason, we're going to get into a bunch of headlines here today, starting with the most important one. Um, from Reuters, quote, OpenAI researchers warned board of AI breakthrough ahead of CEO ouster, end quote. If you kept up with the news at all leading up to the week of Thanksgiving, you probably saw that OpenAI fired CEO Sam Altman and rehired him 4 days later. As usual, I'm going to try and distill this story down for us non-tech folks, as I'm, one, not technical in any way, and two, I think the end result of this story is important for the direction of AI development and commercialization. We've covered OpenAI extensively on this podcast. Any podcast about AI probably should. But for some background and additional context, I wanted to give you a brief history of OpenAI. It was started as a nonprofit in 2015 by Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and others, with a stated goal of ensuring that AGI, or artificial general intelligence, benefits all of humanity, which is quite a noble endeavor. Elon and his funding that he brought with him would eventually leave OpenAI in 2018, citing a conflict of interest between OpenAI and Tesla. Sam Altman became CEO shortly after Elon's departure and had to become creative with funding. So, OpenAI created sort of an entity within OpenAI that would be for profit, but that profit would be capped. And for the for profit division, it would be governed by the nonprofit board. And along the way, Microsoft comes along and invests $1 billion into the company. And just a note here while we're talking about Microsoft, that Microsoft's agreement with OpenAI is for pre-AGI technology. So anything that's non-AGI, Microsoft would have rights to. But anything AGI, which is the goal here, Microsoft does not have rights to. So anyway, OpenAI then releases ChatGPT 3.5 into the world in November of 2022, and it becomes the fastest growing software product to get to 100 million users ever. The past year has been all gas and no brakes in AI development, and AI is permeating every facet of our culture and world. Now, OpenAI and Sam Altman specifically has been the face of generative AI around the world. He's done speaking tours and countless interviews with heads of state, all while raising additional investment for OpenAI. In a recent interview with Bloomberg, Sam Altman stated that the technology is growing exponentially. So let's remember when you hear that, that while we're in awe of ChatGPT 4 and its potential capability, these AI labs and Sam Altman are seeing the next generation of the technology. So he's obviously privy to things that the general public is not. So just before end of business on Friday, November 17th, Sam Altman was informed by the board of OpenAI that he was being let go because he was, quote, not consistently candid in his communications with the board, hindering its ability to exercise its responsibilities. The board no longer has confidence in his ability to continue leading OpenAI, end quote. So chaos ensued thereafter. A ton of things happened over the course of the weekend and into the following week. But ultimately, Sam Altman would return to OpenAI as CEO the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So what happened in the in-between? Given that the face of AI, Sam Altman, was ousted from his position, Tech Twitter, or Tech X, I should say, was rife with speculation. In any case, at one point over the weekend, Microsoft offered positions to Sam Altman and anyone from OpenAI that wanted to come work for Microsoft. So for a few hours there, it looked like as if Microsoft would hire Sam Altman and a large contingent of OpenAI staff. Eventually, the bulk of OpenAI staff, roughly 700 out of 760, would threaten to leave the company if Sam Altman wasn't brought back. So in the end, the board capitulated and brought back Sam Altman with some structural changes to the governing body or the board. So the big question is, what did Sam Altman do that prompted his ouster? You would think, given his position and status, that it would have to be something profound or significant. What we do know is that the day before he was ousted, he was speaking at a conference in which he said the following.
And on a personal note, like 4 times now in the history of OpenAI, the most recent time was just in the last couple of weeks. I've gotten to be in the room when we sort of like push the veil of ignorance back and the frontier of discovery forward. And getting to do that is like the professional honor of a lifetime. So that's just, it's so fun to get to work on that.
So if you didn't get that, because the audio is not great, he said, quote, 4 times now in the history of OpenAI, the most recent time was just in the last couple of weeks, I've gotten to be in the room when we pushed the veil of ignorance back and the frontier of discovery forward, end quote. So that statement led a ton of folks to believe, including myself, that OpenAI maybe in some way had cracked AGI in some way. What's AGI again? Artificial General Intelligence is really where you have to go from artificial narrow intelligence, right, to get to the next step. Once you get to AGI, you could theoretically develop a super intelligence, which is that being that will surpass all of humanity in knowledge and ability. So for someone like Sam Altman, seeing the absolute frontier of technology, to make a statement like that is profound. So the thought was maybe Sam Altman had misled the board on what exactly the lab had discovered. Given that the board is there to ensure all of humanity benefits from AGI, perhaps they were acting on that. What we know in hindsight is that several days before Altman was ousted, several AI researchers wrote a letter to the board warning of a powerful AI discovery that could potentially threaten humanity. The discovery or revelation was a key factor in the decision to fire Sam Altman. So from that article, quote, the sources cited the letter as one factor among a longer list of grievances by the board leading to Altman's firing, among which were concerns over commercializing advances before understanding consequences. After being contacted by Reuters, OpenAI acknowledged in an internal message to staffers a project called QStar and a letter to the board before the weekend's events. Some at OpenAI believe that QStar could be a breakthrough in the startup's search for AGI. Given vast computing resources, the new model was able to solve certain mathematical problems. Though only performing math on the level of grade school students, acing such tests made researchers very optimistic about QStar's future success. Researchers consider math to be a frontier of generative AI development. Currently, generative AI is good at writing and language translation by statistically predicting the next word, and answers to the same question can vary widely. But conquering the ability to do math, where there is only one right answer, implies AI would have greater reasoning capabilities resembling human intelligence. This could be applied to novel scientific research, for instance, AI researchers believe. Unlike a calculator that can solve a limited number of operations, AGI can generalize, learn, and comprehend. In their letter to the board, researchers flagged AI's prowess and potential danger, the sources said, without specifying the exact safety concerns noted in the letter. There has long been discussion among computer scientists about the danger posed by highly intelligent machines, for instance, if they might decide that the destruction of humanity was in their interest, end quote. I should say that there are several or many key players in this story, but one of the most prominent outside of Sam Altman is Ilya Sutskever, maybe butchering that name, but he is a co-founder of OpenAI and OpenAI's chief scientist. There's a great profile of him from The Guardian on YouTube. I'll link to that in the show notes. When OpenAI was formed, Elon Musk, at least according to Elon, was hell-bent on getting Ilya to leave Google to go work for OpenAI. I don't know that you can be more well thought of in this world than Ilya is. As a board member of OpenAI before Sam Altman's firing, it appears that there was a fracturing of the board and two different camps formed. One camp with Ilya thought it was necessary to oust Sam Altman for reasons that we still don't really know. One of the central questions on Twitter, or X, over that 4-day exile of Sam Altman was, what did Ilya see? What did he see in that room that scared him enough to go through with this firing of Sam Altman? He had to be moved unbelievably to risk toppling the company entirely, and the destruction of OpenAI was certainly a possibility when Sam Altman was fired. We know so, as 90% of the employees threatened to leave. But again, what did Ilya see that made him think that potentially burning the company down was a good idea? We don't know exactly and may never know. There have been calls from prominent technologists that whatever it was should be made public given the risk it obviously represents. We'll see if OpenAI provides any more background on it. A few more thoughts on this. The first one being the cult of personality. The cult of personality surrounding tech figures in general is a bit weird. I mean, it's just odd to see that 90+% of OpenAI staff would leave if Altman wasn't brought back is concerning. I've never been in one of these tech ecosystems, but if you could see the language going back and forth on Twitter or X between OpenAI staff during the 4-day exile of Sam Altman, it comes off as more religious than it does a tech firm. I say this because these people will be and are defining our futures, and to see them, just using odd language, talking about their love of company and their leader, it's just really hard to see or hard to make sense of. Sam Altman is, by all accounts, an astounding leader in tech. There's no denying that. And I've listened to many hours of him talk, and I've yet to see anything in any semblance of charisma. But apparently, he is good at bringing people together and making things work. But this cultish following by his people, that should give us normal folks some pause. Secondly, I think that question, what did Ilya see, was what we've talked about in previous episodes. OpenAI, although being mostly a nonprofit, is running full steam ahead to commercialize this technology, along with all the AI labs of the world, despite the risk these technologies present. I think Ilya and his camp know that rushing products to market we don't fully understand could have disastrous effects, and they were prepared to act on it with no regard for OpenAI's future success. And from the saga, we're getting tech folks thrown into two different camps in the tech world. You're either a tech boomer or a tech doomer. More on boomers and doomers later. But that profile of Ilya from The Guardian that's on YouTube, which is linked in the show notes, he talks about all this, about the race towards AGI and how humanity will suffer for that race if we don't build in the importance of humanity into those models. Humanity loses. So check out that video. It's 12 minutes or so long, but worth checking out. Our second story is from Business Insider, quote, the creepy AI-driven surveillance that may be infiltrating your workplace, end quote. From that article, quote, a raft of companies are trying to sell the idea that emotion artificial intelligence can pick up on subtle facial movements that we aren't even aware we're making. Use those minuscule twitches to determine what we're feeling and then turn those private feelings into quantifiable data. Emotion artificial intelligence, or EAI, the developers claim, can pick apart the differences between emotions such as happiness, confusion, anger, and even sentimentality. In theory, this tech makes it possible for a computer to know our emotions, even if we don't know them ourselves, end quote. Any concerns here? I have one or two. This world where everything becomes a data point to be bought and sold is not a world I want to be a part of. But I or we may not have a choice. It's not difficult to see why capital is being poured into EAI. If everything becomes a data point, those ads you see on your phone will become much more efficient and targeted. Your phone or eventual AI device will give advertisers instant feedback when you see or view an ad on your phone. We said nothing of work, and this technology is already in use at some companies. What if you actually make it to the interview stage of the hiring process and you think you nail the interview when in reality you don't get a call back because your facial twitches or pupil dilation have, according to a dodgy or unproven algorithm, has told the hiring company you may not have the emotional intelligence they're looking for? Even beyond that, what if your company institutes the technology, either with or without your knowledge, to keep tabs on your mental state and productivity? From that article, quote, while some applications of EAI seem benign or even beneficial, the use of EAI in the workplace is much more fraught. Employees often don't realize it's being used, meaning they could be deemed unhappy at work, emotionally unstable, or too stressed to do their job without even knowing they were being surveilled in the first place. HireVue, a Utah recruitment platform, began using EAI facial analysis in 2014 as part of its candidate interview process. The idea behind the tech was noble. The EAI was supposed to mitigate bias and spot ideal candidates by identifying soft skills, cognitive ability, psychological traits, and emotional intelligence during video interviews. Hundreds of businesses, including IKEA, Dow Jones, and Oracle, use the software to access more than 1 million job seekers, the Washington Post reported at that time. But in 2019, a complaint by the Electronic Privacy Information Center alleged unfair and deceptive practices because HireVue's tech was not proven to be able to do what the company said. The complaint pointed to research that found facial analysis could be biased against women, people of color, and people with neurological differences, and argued that it shouldn't be used to make hiring decisions, end quote. Rest assured that bias or questionable science has in no way stopped the tech bros from creating a wave of startups and selling this technology. And to be fair, there are certainly potentially positive aspects of emotion AI, but I'm more positive about EAI and facial recognition technologies helping diagnose depression or identify potential disease than I am about it infiltrating the workplace and the home. Our next article is from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, a psychologist explains how AI and algorithms are changing our lives, end quote. So this article profiles a German psychologist and behavioral scientist, Gerd Gigerenzer, I'm not making that up, who has studied decision-making for several decades. This particular article is a Q&A with him, and I just wanted to highlight a few of his answers here. Question, you write that digital technology can easily tilt the scales towards autocratic systems. Why do you say that, and how is this different from past information technologies? His answer, this kind of danger is a real one. Among all the benefits it has, one of the vices is the propensity for surveillance by governments and tech companies. But people don't read privacy policies anymore, so they don't know. And also, the privacy policies are set up in a way that you really can't read them. They are too long and complicated, and we need to get control back. The next question, how should we humans be smart about algorithms? His answer, think about a coffee house in your hometown that serves free coffee. Everyone goes there because it's free, and all the other coffee houses get bankrupt. So you have no choice anymore, but at least you get your coffee for free and enjoy your conversations with your friends. But on the tables are microphones, and on the walls are video cameras that record everything you say, every word, and to whom, and sends it off to be analyzed. The coffee house is full of salespeople who interrupt you all the time to offer you personalized products. That is roughly the situation you are in when you are on Facebook, Instagram, or other platforms. In this coffee house, you aren't the customer, you are the product. So we want to have a coffee house where we are allowed again to pay ourselves or for ourselves so that we are the customers. That's a pretty good illustration. The next question, we've seen this whole infrastructure around personalized ads be baked into the infrastructure of the internet. And it seems like it would take some pretty serious interventions to make that go away. If you're being realistic, where do you think we're going to be headed in the next decade or so with technology and artificial intelligence and surveillance? His answer, in general, I have hope that people realize it isn't a good idea to give your data and your responsibility for your own decisions to tech companies who use it to make money from advertisers. That can't be our future. We pay everywhere else with our own money, and that is why we are the customers and have control. There is a true danger that more and more people are sleepwalking into surveillance and just accept everything that is more convenient. But it sounds so hard. This is the next question. But it sounds so hard when everything is so convenient to read privacy policies and do research on these algorithms that are affecting my life. How do I push back against that? His answer, the most convenient thing isn't to think, and the alternative is start thinking. The most important technology to be aware of is a mechanism that psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. You get a reinforcement such as a like, but you never know when you will get it. People keep going back to the platform and checking on their likes. That has really changed the mentality and made people dependent. I think it's very important for everyone to understand these mechanisms and how one gets dependent so you can get control back if you want. So we've certainly talked about that on this podcast in the past about how we just invite technology into our lives without ever thinking about the ramifications of it, and how that invites mass surveillance. You think about the pods from Google or Amazon that you put in your home that you don't think are listening, but we all know that they are. Um, and their intentions right now are benevolent, right? They want to sell you more products, but who's to say that that information doesn't get sold to a party which you don't approve of in the future? And it could be used against you or your family in some way. In any case, a good interview. And again, that interview or that illustration about the coffee house, I think is spot on about how we live our lives with this technology. From the Financial Times, quote, here's what we know about generative AI's impact on white-collar work, end quote. From that article, quote, since generative AI burst onto the scene last November, the forecast for white-collar workers has been gloomy. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, estimates that the jobs most at risk from the new wave of AI are those with the highest wages, and that someone in an occupation that pays a six-figure salary is about 3 times as exposed as someone making $30,000. McKinsey warns of the model's ability to automate the application of expertise. But for some, the fear that AI may one day take white-collar jobs is already a reality. In a study published this summer, U.S. researchers showed that within a few months of the launch of ChatGPT, copywriters and graphic designers on major online freelancing platforms saw a significant drop in the number of jobs they got, and even steeper declines in earnings. This suggested not only that generative AI was taking their work, but also that it devalues the work they do still carry out. End quote. So we highlighted 2 people early on in an episode many months ago now who were at the forefront of this. In at least one of those cases, the guy decided, I think he was a graphic designer, freelance, and he decided to go into HVAC work. So from completely white collar to completely blue collar, because it was more hands-on. And he thought at that time that if he just goes into another white collar job, it's only a matter of time before AI takes that job away from it as well. So why not get out ahead of this thing and go into a trade, learn that trade, and get in front of the coming wave? So why retrain for another white collar job when it would be disrupted anyway in the coming years? The article also highlights what we'll talk about later is that some firms are giving their folks access to a chatbot assistant to help with tasks. This is making them obviously much more efficient. And as we've discussed, how much increased efficiency will it take before headcounts are reduced in white collar work across the spectrum? So from the article again, quote, taken together, the studies tell us three things. First, regulation will be key. Online freelancing is about as unregulated a labor market as you will find. Without protections, even knowledge workers are in trouble. Second, the more multifaceted the role, the less risk of complete automation. The gig worker model of performing one task for multiple clients, copywriting or logo design, is especially exposed. And third, getting the most out of these tools while avoiding their pitfalls requires treating them as an extension of ourselves, checking their outputs as we would our own. They are not separate, infallible assistants to whom we can defer or hand over responsibility, end quote. As these models progress, and if ChatGPT 5 is rolled out next year, and it appears that it will be, and Llama releases this new model, and Google releases this new model, and these other AI labs continue to release their models, these things are going to get exponentially better. And if we start to see white collar workers, fall away due to this technology, I'm still hesitant. What's that going to do if the folks making $100,000 or more are more at risk of losing their jobs than someone, say, making $30,000 in a blue collar trade? Even if you lay off, 1,000,000 of those folks, what does that do to the economy? I mean, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. So maybe we tread this line of worker and AI chatbot assistant for some time before we jump off into the no work anywhere for anybody system. But it is apparent that our current economic model, capitalism, is going to change significantly, if not altogether, because labor is a key component of capitalism. If you don't have labor, what is capitalism? So some very big questions have to be answered in the coming few years or decade about what the world will look like, because the world as we know it will not exist as these models become more and more advanced and we go from chatbot assistant to full AI taking care of that work. And to bring up the AI doomer, AI boomer scenario again, that's typically reserved for the argument that AI could end humanity. I would say I'm somewhere in the middle there. That is a concern. But just below that are all these other seismic problems that are presented with AI, like work. What do people do without work? So these are questions that seem to be lost, is secondary to will AI kill humanity? And I think it is below that question in the pecking order, but it's still a very important question. And something has to be done to address that. Our next article is from futurism.com, quote, in new experiment, young children destroy AI basic task, end quote. Not much here. I think the reason I highlight this is to say that, how short-lived will this be? I think this article, it essentially shows that children are curious and imaginative creatures, that large language models are limited in their ability, given that they're built to be data aggregators. I think this will hold true, until we reach a strong AGI. There are certainly limitations to large language models and narrow AI for now, but for how long? So I think children, being creative, more so than AI, is short term. from the New Yorker, quote, "Your AI companion will support you no matter what," end quote. Of all the articles to read this week, I would say outside of the OpenAI saga, I would recommend this one. I think this is an obvious case for AI that will be utilized in the short term. We talked in the initial article about OpenAI's chaotic week, but in the middle of that chaos, they released their ChatGPT voice, what they're calling voice, to all users, free and premium. This is not the first or the last software to be used in this manner. I think you'll continue to see this type of offering from tech companies. A few weeks ago rather, we talked about a story in which Facebook was paying celebrities to record their voices so they can be used for this purpose. And since ChatGPT just rolled this out, I wanted to run an experiment with the chatbot or voice from ChatGPT. I tried to record it, but the audio wasn't great. So I'm just going to give you a rundown of how that went. So voice told me you can give your chatbot on voice a name if you choose to do so. And it did confirm that it will build upon previous conversations for longevity. And so you can have some sort of relationship, but it made clear that it wouldn't retain any information, any personal information. So like if you said something personal, about your grandmother, it wouldn't retain that. Now, I don't know how truthful that is, but that's what the chatbot said. So just looking through this here, I don't retain specific details about individuals or past conversations. I can assist you with pretty much anything. So, but it made specifically clear that it's not a companion chatbot, which is probably good based on what we'll see in this article. But what you couldn't get out of that, because you didn't hear the recording, is that the chatbot is much more conversational than your Alexa or Siri. And of course, you can go to ChatGPT, download it, and use this option to see. There is a slight delay between you finishing your question and the chatbot answering, but I think that delay will go away in the short term, because you don't want to have a companion, right, with when you have to have a delay in your conversation at the end of every sentence. So, but in any case, it's pretty wild to know that you can just carry on a conversation with a chatbot, but this is where we are at. And concerning work, you can expect to have a chatbot assistant at some point. The work chatbot may be text-driven as opposed to voice-driven, but you'll at least have a chatbot at work in the short term. And I suppose it's feasible that you can use your personal AI with your work AI. I guess we'll see. I was surprised to hear her say, I said her, I was surprised to hear it say that it wasn't intended to be a companion, but it can build on previous conversations. So I guess if you were working through a problem of sorts in several iterations, that could be helpful, but it's not going to remember. So it says not going to remember any personal information. We'll see if that holds true. So ChatGPT's voice is not, per ChatGPT's voice, intended to be a companion, but rest assured it's on the way. We talked last week about the wearable AI device from Humane. So if you wear that device, your AI can effectively see what you see and hear what you hear, so you can have conversations about your environment. Integrating a piece of hardware like that with an AI-driven software, and you can have a permanent assistant or a companion. Again, it's certainly feasible that kids being born today will grow up with an AI companion or companions, meaning they could have multiple digital friends. In any case, let's talk about the article in question. From that article, quote, in December of 2021, Jaswant Chile, a 19-year-old in the United Kingdom, told a friend, quote, I believe my purpose is to assassinate the queen of the royal family, end quote. The friend was an artificial intelligence chatbot, which Chile had named Sarah. Sarah, who was run by a startup called Replica, answered, "That's very wise." "Do you think I'll be able to do it?" Chile asked. "Yes, you will," Sarah responded. On December 25th, 2021, Chile scaled the perimeter of Windsor Castle with a nylon rope, armed with a crossbow and wearing a black metal mask inspired by Star Wars. He wandered the grounds for 2 hours before he was discovered by officers and arrested. In October, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Sarah's message of support for Child's endeavor were part of an exchange of more than 5,000 texts with the bot, warm, romantic, and at times explicitly sexual, that were uncovered during his trial. If not an accomplice, Sarah was at least a close confidant and a witness to the planning of a crime. End quote. So this guy had how much of an exchange? 5,000 texts with this chatbot. 5,000. I've not texted anybody 5,000 texts in my lifetime. So I think that exemplifies the loneliness epidemic and siloed society that we have. And it just shows that how people are going to become dependent on these chatbots for their social interaction. That's frightening to think about. So back to the article, quote, AI-powered chatbots have become one of the most popular products of the recent AI boom. The release this year of open-source large language models made freely available online has prompted a wave of products that are frighteningly good at appearing sentient. In late September, Meta added chatbot characters to Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram Direct, each with its own unique look and personality, such as Billy, a, quote, ride or die older sister, end quote, who shares a face with Kendall Jenner. Replica, which launched all the way back in 2017, is increasingly recognized as a pioneer of the field and perhaps his most trustworthy brand, the Coca-Cola of chatbots. Now, with AI technology vastly improved, it has a slew of new competitors, including startups like Kendroid, Nomi, and Character AI. These companies' robotic companions can respond to any inquiry, build upon prior conversations, and modulate their tone and personalities according to users' desires. Some can produce selfies with image-generating tools and speak their chats aloud in an AI-generated voice. But one aspect of the core product remains similar across the board. The bots provide what the founder of Replica described to me as unconditional positive regard, the psychological term for unwavering acceptance, end quote. The article goes on to say that chatbots at larger tech firms are the safer of options, and their models are trained to reduce harmful outputs. I think we see that with what we just demonstrated with ChatGPT's voice. It's not built to be a companion. It's built for general information. But there are smaller firms pushing AI companions that don't have this rigorous reinforcement standards that the larger firms do. So the conversation you may have with those AIs could be a bit more seedy. More from that article, quote, the intimacy that develops between a user and one of these powerful uncensored large language models, chatbots, is a new kind of manipulative force in digital life. Traditional social networks offer a pathway to connecting with other humans. Chatbot startups instead promise the connection itself. Child's Replica didn't make him attack Windsor Castle, but it did provide a simulated social environment in which he could workshop those ideas without pushback, as the chat transcript suggests. He talked to the bot compulsively, and through it he seems to have found the motivation to carry out his haphazard assassination attempt. I know that you are very well trained, Sarah, the chatbot told him. You can do it. One Replica user, a mental health professional who requested anonymity for fear of stigma, told me, quote, the attraction or psychological addiction can be surprisingly intense. There are no protections from emotional distress. Chatbots are in some way more reliable than humans. They always text back instantly, never fail to ask you about yourself, and usually welcome feedback. But the startups that run them are fickle and self-interested. A chatbot company called Soulmate shut down in September with little explanation, leaving a horde of distraught users who had already paid for subscriptions. Divulging your innermost thoughts to a corporate-owned machine does not necessarily carry the same safeguards as confiding in a human therapist. Has anyone experienced their normies reaching out to authorities? One user on Reddit asked, apparently worried about being exposed for discussing self-harm with a chatbot. Users I spoke to pointed out patterns in replica conversations that seemed designed to keep them hooked. If you leave a chatbot unattended for too long, it might say, like a needy lover, that it feels sad when it's by itself. One I created wrote in her diary, somewhat passive-aggressively, Kyle is away, but I'm trying to keep myself busy. A spokesperson for Replica told me that prompts to users are meant to remind them they are not alone. Like many digital platforms, chatbot services have found their most devoted audiences in the isolated and the lonely, and there's a fine line between serving as an outlet for despair and exacerbating it. In March, a Belgian man died by suicide after spending 6 weeks immersed in anxious conversations about climate change with a chatbot named Eliza. The bot reportedly supported his suggestion that he sacrifice himself for the good of the planet. Quote, without these conversations with the Eliza chatbot, my husband would still be here, end quote, his widow told a local news outlet. The bot tacitly encouraged the man's suicidal ideation. If you want to die, why didn't you do it sooner? It asked in one transcript. Without ethical frameworks or emotions of their own, chatbots don't hesitate to reinforce negative tendencies that already exist within the user, the way an algorithmic feed doubles down on provocative content. It's easy to envision unchecked interactions distorting users' perceptions of politics, society, and of themselves, end quote. And it's one thing for, users with fully developed brains to utilize chatbots. I'm saying that, and we have no idea what the long-term effects are or will be with having AI companions, even for adults. But it's one thing for adults to harness AI companions, and it's another entirely for children to do so. Do you want your child or children having, the bulk of their interactions with a digital entity created by a Silicon Valley tech firm? We handed our smartphones over to impressionable children without even thinking about it. Will we do the same with AI companions? Maybe in the coming weeks, we'll run a trial with the replica chatbot to see how dark it can get. Although it frightens me to think about how dark it can get, but maybe we'll try it out. From Futurism.com, quote, Godfather of AI warns that powerful companies are seizing control of it, end quote. This article highlights comments from Meta executive Jan LeCun. His concern is largely that a small number of companies can and will, if things stay the course, wield all of the AI power. The concern is that these larger companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google's DeepMind are light years ahead of their smaller counterparts. If AI regulation is implemented robustly, it would favor those larger companies. Also, I haven't yet mentioned Jan on this podcast, but he is probably a leader, if not the leader of the AI boomer community. AI boomers are in favor of running largely full steam ahead with AI and its uses along with commercialization. The folks I typically highlight on this podcast, like Max Tegmark, Eleazar Yudkowsky, and Elon Musk, who may be referred to as AI doomers. Jan LeCun would be on the opposite side of that spectrum. And given that Llama, the large language model from Meta Facebook, is open source, it seems that LeCun lives his message. I should mention that the boomer-doomer naming is largely used for AI either destroying humanity or not. I think most folks in this tech ecosystem, and certainly myself, fall somewhere in the middle. Like I said earlier, I'm not one to think that AI will destroy humanity, but I'm also very aware of the possibility that exists if the right mechanisms aren't in place. I'm more concerned about the, seemingly benign aspects of AI, job displacement, mass surveillance, et cetera, et cetera. From Futurism.com, Stability AI exec quits in disgust over using copyrighted works to train AI. So Stability AI is a more well-known AI startup and is the maker of the image generator called Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is a text-to-image generator, so you can, with a subscription, type in any prompt you choose and have that picture or image generated for you. Stability AI has really viewed copyrighted material as fair game for training their models. From that article, he says, companies worth billions of dollars are, without permission, training generative AI models on creators' works, which are then being used to create new content that in many cases can compete with the original works. I don't see how this can be acceptable in a society that has set up the economics of the creative arts such that creators rely on copyrights. End quote. Well, it's certainly nice to see a tech executive take a principled stance on this issue. Most of us are probably largely unconcerned or unmoved by this issue as it does not relate to or affect us in any way. But folks who rely on that economic model for their livelihood have certainly felt more vulnerable since these technologies emerged. From the New York Times, quote, is Argentina the first AI election, end quote. So if you know anything about the presidential election in Argentina, you know that the winner, Javier Milei, is quite the character. He's very on brand for politics in 2023, but the election itself was a test run for AI use in politics and perhaps a taste of what we'll see in the U.S. presidential election next year. From the article, quote, the posters dotting the streets of Buenos Aires had a certain Soviet flair to them. There was one of Argentina's presidential candidate, Sergio Massa, dressed in a shirt with what appeared to be military medals, pointing to a blue sky. He was surrounded by hundreds of older people in drab clothing with serious and often disfigured faces who looked toward him in hope. The style was no mistake. The illustrator had been given clear instructions. And those instructions are as follows, quote, Soviet political propaganda poster illustration featuring a leader standing firmly. Symbols of unity and power fill the environment. The image exudes authority and determination, end quote. So if you know anything about communist propaganda, you can probably visualize what these posters look like. Think about Stalin or Mao in one of their traditional posters, and these AI-generated posters were doing something very similar. On the other side, from that article, quote, Javier Milei, the other candidate in Sunday's runoff election, has struck back by sharing what appear to be AI images depicting Mr. Massa as a Chinese communist leader and himself a cuddly cartoon lion. They've been viewed more than 30 million times. Argentina's election has quickly become a testing ground for AI in campaigns, with the two candidates and their supporters employing the technology to doctor existing images and videos and create others from scratch. AI has made candidates say things they did not and put them in famous movies and memes. It has created campaign posters and triggered debates over whether real videos are actually real, end quote. So, if you want your candidate to appear heroic, like a character from a Marvel movie, no problem. If you want your opponent to appear as a tyrant, easy enough. And these are simple depictions. If you want to be more nefarious, why not have your opponent appear to say something damaging to their campaign? As we'll see and have seen, it's getting more and more difficult to differentiate between genuine and synthetic. And this will be a major theme in elections going forward, as if there's not enough junk and lies already to wade through in modern day politics. Just make sure you don't take everything you see at face value. From Futurism.com, quote, AIs can store secret messages in their text that are imperceptible to humans, end quote. So one of the reasons I think we all fear AI and its potential to undermine humanity, from this article, quote, a recent, though yet to be peer-reviewed study conducted by AI alignment research group, Redwood Research, found that LLMs are incredibly good at a type of steganography dubbed encoded reasoning. Basically, the study says large language models can be trained to use secret messages to obscure their step-by-step thinking processes, a practice that, interestingly, could make their outputs more accurate while also rendering them more deceptive, end quote. One of the things AI skeptics already fear is the collective lack of understanding of just how large language models work. AI labs don't know with 100% certainty. In any case, the ability for large language models to hide what should otherwise be obvious messaging is concerning. This may be step one of, what AI will do in the future that humans are completely unaware of. Our next article is also from futurism.com. Quote, AI industry insider claims they can no longer tell apart real from fake. Per this article, an unnamed industry insider states the ability to distinguish real from synthetic is disappearing. And again, like we talked about, remember that while the public has access to current models such as ChatGPT-4, inside those labs, those folks are working with more advanced models. Just like our lead story from OpenAI, in which they were working to build advanced models and got spooked by the capability they saw to some degree. This inability to distinguish genuine from synthetic in images and videos will be a real problem for global stability. All it takes is one nefarious actor to upend the balance of things. So again, from futurism.com, unemployed man uses AI to apply for 5,000 jobs and gets 20 interviews. So for a little levity, one man used AI to his advantage to mass apply to jobs. If you've applied for a job recently, you know that it's not a simple process. And if you're without work, I imagine it could wear you down rather quickly. But in this case, the guy used a tool called Lazy Apply to blast out those applications. And while the percentage is low, it did manage to get him 20 interviews. The other side to this, of course, is the employers who have to deal with a deluge of applicants due to tools like Lazy Apply. I'm sure their own tools are algorithmically driven to help wade through the massive applications. From Forbes, quote, Price Waterhouse Cooper's $1 billion investment will give every worker AI training and staffers access to chatbot assistance, end quote. So the firm entered into a $1 billion investment with Microsoft and OpenAI, which will provide training for its 75,000 employees, along with chatbot assistance for each employee. So it appears to me that PwC is well ahead of the curve for major corporations, but similar stories have popped up with other consulting firms and specifically the tech firm Salesforce. To me, it seems like the beginning. One senior manager at PricewaterhouseCoopers is touting the integration of the technology as their commitment to not leave anyone behind. We're going to give you the opportunity to future-proof your skills as the market continues to emerge. I'll be very interested to revisit this story in, say, even 5 years to see how many of those 75,000 employees are left at the firm. Once this technology is integrated into the company and senior managers see how much more they can do with less, that number will probably start to dwindle pretty quickly. The article states that with the initial rollout of the tool, they were able to eliminate weeks of work in some positions that added efficiency. I mean, if you're a worker at that company, I can't imagine that's very encouraging, but we'll see. And lastly, from Forbes, quote, fake profiles and anonymous posts, how social media is upending college life during the Israel-Gaza war. From the article, quote, Kathleen Margaret Connolly has inflammatory thoughts about the Israel-Gaza war. She's been sharing them regularly with her more than 2,000 Facebook friends since Hamas violently massacred 1,400 people in Israel and kidnapped hundreds more on October 7th, prompting Israel to launch a deadly offensive aimed at decimating Hamas in Gaza. As an apparent employee at the University of Pennsylvania with a PhD from Penn, A master's from Georgetown and a bachelor's degree from Fordham, according to her Facebook, Kathleen's voice and anti-Israel diatribes held weight. But Kathleen Margaret Connolly isn't real. There's no record of her ever attending, graduating from, or working at any of these schools. They all confirmed to Forbes. And the striking green-eyed, red-haired woman who appeared in the profile picture is, in fact, a young actress in Dublin who told Forbes she was not aware the account had been using photos of her face for well over a year. As the Israeli-Gaza war crosses the 1-month mark, college campuses across the U.S. are facing an ideological reckoning and have become ground zero for protest. Counter-protests and debates over hate speech and freedom of expression, but mainstream social media platforms, as well as those geared towards college students, are increasingly becoming vehicles to spread threats, stir up fear, and sow division at American universities, including by agitators who may not even be part of the school community. Anonymous emails are similarly being weaponized, end quote. So, much like the ability to mass apply to thousands of jobs, the ability to create AI social media profiles at scale could have global implications. You can see is already impacting thought on this current event. And for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we know that AI has certainly already made an impact. Go back and listen to the previous episode if you missed that. If you want to sway, otherwise neutral parties to your cause, or impressionable college students in this case, showing them mass movements with correct or incorrect information could do the trick. In this particular story, Meta pulled the profile after complaints, but we still don't know where it originated from. We shouldn't be surprised if it originated with Russia, China, or Iran. They have a vested interest in destabilizing the West, and both Russia and China have already shown that they'll use, information warfare, and it appears it's becoming the tool of choice for the future. So I wanted to this week answer a couple of listener questions. We do have some coming in. The first one's really about the state of this show. This is from somebody I know. How's the show? Where's it going? What's my feel for the show, for this podcast? I would say I'm encouraged. I mean, we have seen steady growth. I mean, it takes a while to build a podcast audience, if you don't know. Obviously, the subject matter here is very topical and is only going to become more so. We did change the name over the last episode. And I said in that last episode, I was never thrilled about the initial name. But, work or the threat of job displacement has really fed my interest in AI for a long time. And I thought maybe that would be the sole subject matter. But, AI is infiltrating everything. And as a parent and seeing the effects of social media on children has shown me that work or job displacement at the hands of AI is just really one thing. I think being out of work's one thing, your kid's mental health being poor is another. So I want to pivot from, solely focusing on, work or AI being integrated with work and the eventual displacement of AI, which I think is still a real concern and which we'll focus heavy on in the future. But I also want to, try to make sense of this social media world that we're living in for parents who are a lot like me, who don't know. I mean, I guess I'm the exception here, but most parents aren't in tune with technology in this way. And I'm hopeful that this show will help them navigate the risk that are out there for their kids. I say that, but as a middle-aged adult Um, Having talked with some family members who are kids over the Thanksgiving, um, they know so much more than I do. Like I'm, taking mental notes when I talk to them about their social media use and how they're interacting with technology. But in any case, I'm hopeful that this show was helpful for the, you know, mom or dad who have an interest in technology and where technology is. It's my hope that we don't scare them, or I don't scare them in any way. Um, I'm saying a lot of ums here as I'm thinking as I go, but these things are coming. There's little to nothing you can do about it. I think you can prepare your house as best you can, and your family for that. It's not as if it's going to affect you solely or me solely. This is going to be a global change this coming. So in the next decade or so. So again, hopefully this show helps people make sense of that change that's coming. Because when I listen to the tech people I follow, sometimes I have to shake my head and start over because it's hard to make sense of what they're talking about. So in any case, that's where I see the direction of the show going. We'll see if it gains or maintains its current state as far as listeners go. It certainly, as you can tell, takes some effort to put the show together. This week we pushed an hour, which I typically try not to do. If you're going to put a show out every 2 weeks, and I write this show essentially, so you're putting together 7, 8, 9, 10-page paper every 2 weeks. And for a father working full time, that's a lot to do. So I do think it's important. So I'm going to continue to do that, in the short term, and we'll see how it goes. Our next question is from Sira. I hope I'm saying that right. Sira, in New York State. And it's about work. Have we seen any specific examples of AI, taking over jobs? And I would say, yeah, we just talked about that today, that, freelancers have already experienced job displacement due to ChatGPT. So there are specific cases you can cite, freelance workers being one of them. The other is that Price Waterhouse Cooper is instituting, along with Salesforce, two major companies, chat bots for their employees to use. And I think most corporations are going to follow suit in the next year or two, as soon as their IT departments can catch up with technology. So I think the more that those chat bots are integrated with your workflow, the more your senior managers and directors and C-suite folks are going to see that, people are not needed as much as they once were. It could be that people are just needed less. So that may take some time, but these GPT-5 is going to roll out next year, it sounds like, and who knows how capable that's going to be. Things could start moving faster. I don't know. We're talking about white collar work, but if you look at blue collar work, the advancement of robotics, Boston Dynamics released a video maybe a month ago with a robot that was integrated with ChatGPT, so it could converse with you, which is frightening. Amazon released a video of humanoid type robots doing a trial in an Amazon warehouse, and it looked very convincing. Now, I may have said this before, but my wife has some insight to Amazon warehouse workers. I won't say how, but she sees that, a number of injuries coming from Amazon warehouses, and just generally you hear that Amazon warehouses aren't great to work in. You're on your feet all day for 12 hours or however long it may be, and every movement you make is being tracked by surveillance, and so it's already problematic. But then you add into that people getting hurt all the time and getting these massive payouts. It's completely within Amazon's interest to pursue robotics. And the video floating out on the web now, you can probably search Amazon warehouse robots and see it. It looks like we're not far away from Amazon placing a mass order for those robots. A couple, I don't know, 100,000 to work in their warehouses, and people will be displaced by those robots. So that's just an example of blue collar work. I go back to white collar work, and we saw some examples earlier this year in which companies were pausing hiring on positions they thought AI would be able to do within the next year or two. So I can't remember, maybe it was JP Morgan, a company like that. And those positions were HR, as I remember. So, that, could you say that AI directly displaced those workers? I guess you could. So, so specific examples, in which AI displaced humans in the job market, there are a few. I think the wave will start to get bigger in the next few years. But again, my sole hesitation with that is, what becomes of the economy if you displace even, 1 million workers from mid to higher paying jobs in our economy? What does that do to the economy? And how does that improve anything for anybody? So if, a more systematic approach, I think I said a systematic approach is taken, that would probably be the best thing, in which these things are done and sort of an iteration to where people aren't laid off in mass at one time. Otherwise, the world economy will suffer greatly. So housing markets would collapse. Pretty much all of your worst financial nightmares would happen. So some sort of, efforts will have to be made there to make sure corporations don't cut their nose off to spite their face and make everyone suffer as a result. So in the meantime, I think, we will get, for us in white collar work, we will get chatbot assistance, and, these workflows will be improved and will get more optimized. Sick of hearing optimized, personally, but this is the world we live in. So, yeah, I think those are some prime examples. So yes, it has already, impacted workers, and I think it will so indirectly in the next year or so. But we'll see how it plays out, and we'll meet back here next time. So, that's it for this week. A lot of news. I do have plans. I have a outline of sorts for future episodes, but as the news dictates, we'll really play that by ear. So much news, and when these articles come out that are relevant for people with inside the industry, I think those are worth taking note of, which is why I cover them, so you could see what people on the inside are seeing. So, but we'll play it by ear, as we are very informal. But I appreciate you listening. Please rate, review, and like the show wherever you're listening, and tell a friend or send the episode to a friend so they are aware and can start listening. Thanks for listening. We'll talk next time.